Very excited to have everyone. And I'll do a slow start just so people still have a chance they don't miss anything. But welcome everyone for our final event of Catalyst, or I should say our final guest workshop. This is a great opportunity and we're so happy to have Sarah with us to speak to you all and teach you all so much. And I'm very excited for the next hour or so that we have to learn about elevating your design research. So this is going to be all about UX design, specifically the research side of things. So this is going to be really helpful for all of your projects this weekend. Super excited. Sarah joins us from Prospa, where she is the service design leader. She has led transformation projects and she's spoken at Women at UX and also won 3 Good Design Awards. So without further ado, Sarah, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Charles. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen with you all. Awesome. Just in typical Zoom etiquette, I'll just check. Can you see my screen? Yay. Fantastic. So what I wanted to do was start off with a bit of a story and then lead into what I'm going to take you through. So my very first job as a teenager was at Woolworths, which is a supermarket here in Australia. And as a teenager, I'd get out of bed at 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning to go in and slice bread in the bakery section. And believe me, as an employee in the beginning, I was not the best thing since sliced bread. In fact, it was pretty chaotic and very stressful. I'll set the scene for you. I'm in the bakery in my Woolworths uniform, running around, slicing loaves of bread and dealing with complaints from customers who didn't want their bread sliced. But I'd already sliced all of the bread. And one day I sliced all of the bread as sandwich bread, and turns out that people also want toast bread. I didn't even realize that there was a difference in the bread slicer. One side was for sandwich and one side was for toast. Like who would have known? And then don't even get me started on doing the donuts. Has anyone ever made a donut before? If you have, you can raise your hand because I have. And so to make donuts, you put the dough in this cylinder thing and then it pops out the donut in the shape of like a donut, obviously, hopefully. And then it slides into the oil and then pops out the other side. Then you put it on a stick and then you roll it in cinnamon. Trying to do the bread and the donuts at the same time was surprisingly challenging. I'd be slicing the bread and then the donuts would start getting backed up and they would be way too hot to pick up and in all of these weird shapes and sizes because the dough had run out. And so I found myself throwing a bunch of bread in the bread slicer, then running out and then refilling the dough in the donut machine, then frantically picking up boiling hot donuts, putting them on a stick and then rolling them in the cinnamon. I was madly running around. There was bread, donuts, and pretty unhappy customers everywhere because turns out that people really want their bread and donuts on a Sunday morning here in Australia. This complete chaos is what can happen with your customer research when it's not done right and a process isn't followed. So today, I'm going to take you through what to do before, during, and after your research so it doesn't turn into a complete customer nightmare. Because when you know how to run impactful customer research, then you can create valuable, actionable customer insights that you can apply to your designs and then also get your stakeholders all on board in the process and really bought into that research. So the first thing to do is planning. So before you run your research, you really want to have a really defined plan as to how you're going to do it. And so what you want to do as a first step is when you kick off your research, is to define really clear research objectives. And the key thing for this is that what you want to do is do it with your stakeholders. And so defining with your stakeholders or whoever you're working with, what is it that you want to learn and what are the decisions that you're trying to make? And and being able to do that with them so they're really on board with the process and bought into the value of your research. And so when I was doing research into our 3 to 5 year vision of like, where are we going as an organization, I defined one of our research objectives and plus a few others as understand how we want customers to feel when interacting with us. And so I did this with my stakeholders, my team, to really start to understand and define like, what do we want to learn together? And as part of this research, what are the decisions we're trying to make? So that we all agreed on the outcomes. So when it came to the end of the research, everyone was on the same page. Then the other part, you want to give people the opportunity to be creative in your research. If you just ask questions, it's really restricting. And so I love to do things like running activities like storyboards, worksheets, metaphors, puzzles, to really start to get people thinking differently and to also get them to start telling different stories about their past experience, about their behavior, and getting them to really start to think differently in terms of what they've done before, and then also coming up with new ideas with me. And so when doing research into how people created content on their tablet, I got people to write love letters and then also breakup letters with their tablet. And so I was able to get really interesting stories, and also people were able to have a lot of fun when doing this, because how often do you get to write a love letter or a breakup letter to an inanimate object? And so I was hearing stories about how people loved working on their tablet because it allowed them to connect with their loved ones. And say when they were working, it allowed them to feel freedom that they didn't feel when they had a laptop. Because they felt dragged down when they had a laptop, whereas a tablet, they were like, I can go anywhere, I can do whatever. And then breakup letters. I heard stories about how people they just struggled to make content on their tablet, and it was really hard and it took a long time. They couldn't copy and paste stuff between tabs, and it was a bit hard to format pages. And so I was able to get these really emotional responses from people and really allow them to express their feelings so I could really understand how they felt. And another activity that I've done, this is when designing a new value proposition for a business, was that we asked people what were their feelings that they most commonly associated when engaging with their finances. And so I gave them this board with all of these different emotions and like images and stuff so that we could start helping them to articulate their thoughts and how did they really feel about their finances, so we could get really detailed stories and understandings of how they felt. And so some of the things that I heard was around that a lot of people, it turns out that they have really negative emotions towards their finances. And then one person that we were speaking to was they'd recently gone through a really bad divorce, and they felt really anxious and confused and frustrated around their finances and stressed out because they had quite a large amount of debt that they were trying to pay off. And then they were also paying off credit card debts that they got because they had to make maintenance on the house, and they felt really stressed out, and they felt that they had to work multiple jobs, which is why they were there speaking to me that day. And the thing was that by doing this activity, what we're able to do was really understand the emotions that people associated with their finances, and also was able to act a bit like therapy for them, so they felt like they could share and they could really connect and talk about these different stories with us. And then another one. So in my other life, I love doing improv and stand-up. It's super fun. Highly recommend. And one of the activities that we do is creating a proverb. And so this is like, you might be thinking like, yeah, what is a proverb? So it's a simple and insightful saying. So you've probably heard them before. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. All that glitters is not gold. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And so the goal of this game is to have everyone stand in a circle or on Zoom in a virtual circle. And then one word at a time, each person will say one word to put together that wise saying together. And the thing is that you'll know by the end of it, like there's no like rules or anything as to like when it's done, as long as you're not like trying to be clever or like trying to like put it in a certain way. It's just whatever's really obvious words. And then when you come up with that proverb, you'll really feel it because you'll be like, we're wise philosophers. And then once you come up with that proverb together, you then go, it's like a very fancy golf clap where it's like, yes, yes, yes. And so what I've done before in improv is you must pat every dog. Yes, 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 yes. And you can kind of tell from that one that like, that's pretty like insightful and wise saying. And how I've used this in my like work and my research as well is when doing co-design with people, I've got them together and I've given them a topic. Normally in improv, you don't have a topic, whereas I give a topic that's based around, say, things that we're ideating or something that we're working on, a problem that we're solving. And so one that I've used before is like, say, money management. And then we've come up with these with these proverbs to really start to get people to build ideas together and to not have that ownership of like, oh, it has to be really good. The proverbs are usually really funny. So it's also a fun way to just like have fun, get people to start relaxing as you go into these different activities and sessions. And then the other part that's really important when you're planning your research is to think ahead in terms of where are we going, like how are we going to synthesize this research? And so when you're coming out with those activities or creating those artifacts to test with your participants, thinking really deeply about like, what will help me synthesize this? What should I play back? Like, what's really important? What are some of the things that I really want to find out that say my stakeholders will find really important, or as part of this piece that you're doing, like over the short time period, like how do I allow myself to not, I don't have days to do the synthesis. So what do I put in place to allow me to really easily synthesize what we find out from our research? And the other part of it is to really help you to start to think about how do you create something that resonates and connects with your stakeholders or the people that you're playing back to and the decision makers. And thinking about what are they looking for? What are some of the really important insights that we can share? Because sometimes in research, you don't know what you're going to come out with. And so it's about allowing yourself to have a bit of a framework or an idea as to like, oh, like we really want to have like numbers in this area. We really want to be able to show this or demonstrate this because this is the decision we're making. And so I find by doing that plan at the start, it really allows you to then go like, oh, okay, cool. This is what we need. And so how I've done this before is going back to that 3 to 5 year vision of where are we going as an organization is I had all of these different images. So I had a lot more than these ones, but what I did was I laid them out and I got everyone to select what does our future feel like? What are those interactions like? How do people engage with each other? And getting them to really describe what our future feels like through these images. And so I heard stories about that our future feels like a PT relationship where they coach you, they're your partner, they're helping you, they're supporting you, and they help keep you accountable. They're defining your diet, they're helping to make sure you do exercises correctly, and then they're also making sure that they keep you on track. And so that's what our future should feel like. Or it's like a barber, where it's a really customized and personalized experience. They really know you and they spend the time to get to know you and they take care of you. You feel like by the end of it, you feel really taken care of and like you've met and you've interacted and had a really nice experience that's just about you. And so what we're able to do is really understand that. And then from that form experience principles. And when doing that playback, we use these images to communicate what we'd found out, like this is what the experience should be like, so that people could really start to connect with the research. So you've planned your research. Now, surprisingly, it's time to run the research. So I'll take you through some points in terms of what's really helpful when running your research. So I love to use a co-design approach throughout all of my, like how I run my projects. And co-design is really important because you want your users who are really experts in their experience to be central to your design process. So being basically like the people that you come to design it rather than designing for them, you're designing with them. And so you want to be able to test out your ideas with them. And also by working with them, you're able to understand new perspectives and identify new ideas and opportunities by giving them that creativity and that ability to help form and then solve problems. And by being really embedded in that design process, you're able to really understand deeply what are their problems, what are their experiences, what works for them. And by doing that, you're able to come up with much better designs that really work for the people you're designing for. And so one time I've been doing research into financial advisors and we were looking at designing we identified that there was a problem in terms of how financial advisors created their financial advice. And so what we were doing was we got a bunch of advisors together and gave them the creative freedom to create a new financial advice tool for them to create their financial advice in. And so what we did was we gave them different cards or just empty boxes and allowed them to just resize them, change them, label them different ways, make them bigger, smaller, and in whatever order they felt made sense for them to create their financial advice in. And the thing is that the advisors felt so much value in this process that I'd only asked for one of them to turn up, and I ended up actually having like whole advice firms come and be part of this experience of creating a new financial advice tool because they just saw so much value in it. And they were like, oh, we're able to direct where this product goes and what is the end state. And by doing a lot of different rounds of research, what we were able to do is then design the process, design the product with them and this experience of how it should work, and really make sure that it works for them and how they create their financial advice. And so I was able to understand that the advisors are looking at the customer's goals to see when they apply an action, this is the impact that we're having on it. And then looking back at that to be like, have I put them in a better position? And then looking at the financial projections and going, how's that changed? Are they going well? Do I need to make any more changes? And then I'm really understanding from that, like, what is we called it like the level 1 view, like what is the dashboard view? And then what's the level 2? So when we click into it, we're able to really design that with the financial advisors to go and create a tool that really helped them to create great financial advice for their customers. And then the other part of this is to take structured notes. And so what I find is that particularly if I have a short project or depending on the type of research that I'm doing, like if it's usability testing, being able to save time through not needing to go through all of the transcripts, but being able to take structured notes to be able to quickly come up with those insights and then make those changes, particularly in like a short period of time. Being able to have like those structured notes that you can refer back to allows you that flexibility of slowly come up with insights. And then if you need to deep dive in and go in deeper into the videos or transcripts that you have to clarify any moments in time as well. And so how I've done this before is when doing research into super, which is kind of like, I think it's like a 401k in America, which is like a retirement product. And so what we were doing was understanding from people was their different, we had these different offers and we were testing it with them. And what we were doing was we're in person. So we had, I had a set for my participant and then I had a set for my note taker. And what we'd set up beforehand was what was the easiest way for us to take notes on this. And so we were laying out each of the cards and then my note taker was taking notes on each of the offers to basically group it all together so that when it came to the end of this research, we're able to then go and just review what were the best performing offers, which ones worked really well, what do we need to do, what is the opportunity to go forward? And we're able to really quickly and easily synthesize the research and then understand where we need to deep dive a bit further. And then another way that I've done this is working in a way that allows my stakeholders to easily take notes that works for them or other people on my team. And so working with them to define what is the easiest way for them to do it. Is it that they want to handwrite it? Is it they want to like type them up or anything like that? Like what works for them? And so this one's from doing research, again, into the new value proposition for a business, where I had we were testing these different attributes. And what I put together was these different areas that we were testing. And I gave them to my stakeholders so that they could easily just document what are they observing, what are they hearing, and be really included into the research instead of often what I find is some people come along to the research and they're doing different work. And so allowing them to really have a structured way to take those notes and then to have that key takeaways at the bottom of it so that they can start to articulate like, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? And starting to be really included in the research as well. And then the other part of this is to use summary activities. So I find it really helpful to give participants the opportunity you go through a lot of different activities and then to allow them to summarize their thoughts and to articulate them in an easy way. And so by doing summary activities, you're allowing your participants to have a way to really connect with like, this is what I've throughout the session, this is what I've like, what my thoughts are, but it's also giving you a really easy way when you do come to that synthesis to go like, oh, okay, this is what I've heard, this is what we saw. And then also as well, if you want to make like video clips or anything of the session, like highlight reels, you can then use like some of these ones as like easy ways to go like, oh, that was the last 10 minutes of the session. And so how I've done this before is when doing research into a new financial app, what we did was we gave people three wishes from a magic genie. And so they could ask them any questions about their finances, but they had 3 wishes. And so what we heard was questions around, how do I manage my finances? How do I get my finances to manage themselves? What shares should I buy? How do I plan for my retirement? And then of course, everyone was asking for their unlimited wishes, because why wouldn't you? That was one of their like first wishes. And so giving them that opportunity to really ask any questions allowed us to really understand what is it that people want from this financial app? What are their needs? What are they asking for? How do they want to use this? And what questions do we need to answer? And then the other part of it was when doing research into this, what we were doing was at the start of the session, so we did the genie at the end, and then at the start of the session, when coming up with this new financial app, we asked people these different questions around their finances, like what is their confidence with their finances? How do you interact with, who do you interact with to make financial decisions? So we could really start to understand how people are interacting with their finances. What is their relationship? What are the different archetypes that we're interacting with? And so we were able to understand those archetypes as to how they're engaging with their finances. And then as we went through the research session, we're able to then go like, how much does this align with what they're telling us? Like the questions that they're asking the magic genie, like, does this like, are they actually really confident, or are they saying that they're really confident, but they're asking like, say, really simple questions with their finances? And so what we're able to do is then identify like these different archetypes. What are their needs for the app? What are they looking for? And what are these behaviors that they have as well? And then it also gave us a really easy way to then play back to our stakeholders, because we had these nice tools that we could then show that like people are reporting that they feel really confident, but they're actually like quite low in terms of their confidence. And so this is how we should design the experience for them and enable them to really understand their finances better. And so then now that you run your research, now it's time to put together that playback for your stakeholders. So one of the key things that I always find after research is to do a brain dump straight after to capture what stood out. And so what I love to do is to do this individually first, to really just capture like, what are all the things that I noticed, that I observed, that I heard from that research session, and noting that down. And so what I use sometimes is like this template where it's like, what are the highlights? What are the lowlights? And so what went really well? What are some of the things that like didn't work, particularly like say for usability or other types of research? It's like, what did we think was going to perform well that didn't? And so what you're able to do with this is to go then, based on that research session, have these like snippets that you're able to then refer back to. Particularly, like I've done this before when I've interviewed like 18 people, and you kind of get to the end of it and you're like, who did we speak to? And so this allows you to then go, okay, cool, like these are the people that we spoke to, and to refamiliarize yourself with that session as to like, this is what happened. But it also allows you to do that continuous improvement throughout your research as well, to go, are we hitting those research objectives that we defined at the start? Do we need to make any changes? Do we need to deep dive any further? Are there any questions that have come up that we would actually like to answer in these next few sessions? And so you're able to then use this to make those changes to the research as needed, or particularly like say if an activity didn't work, like how do we need to change that to improve it so that we find out the things that we're looking for from those participants. And the other part of this as well is that you have that snippet and that capture of like what happened, and it allows you to then, when you go into your next research session, to kind of like remove all of that new information that you've learned from your brain, so you can go into the next session with like a fresh brain as well, so it's not like clouded with all of these other things that happened in all of your other sessions as well. And so then you're able to go into the session and really deeply listen to that participant and hear what they're saying without thinking about all of these past sessions that you've ran. Then the other part of this is I find it really helpful to have a presentation template, particularly if I define this at the start as well. to go through, this is how I'm looking to present back, and to have one that I use for certain types of research to create that familiarity for my stakeholders, or to also just allow me to, we might not know what comes out of the research, but allowing us to have like, this is like there's certain types of elements of the research that will constantly be playing back. And so one that I've used before is say, and this first part usually doesn't change. It's usually sometimes the last part, depending on the research. What are the research objectives? So having that as the first part of it, so that when we go into it, like this is what we wanted to find out, the decisions we were trying to make. Then who are the participants? So having a bit of a description as to this is who we were speaking to. Then putting as part of that, what section of the research. So I often like to break down my research, and particularly how I structure my discussion guide, as to, we're going to talk about like your needs for your finances. Then we're going to talk about the questions that you have, and breaking down that discussion guide, and then breaking down the research into those sections, if it works. Sometimes it doesn't work because you've found out all of these different things. But then for each of those different sections or sections of insights that you have, then having like an illustration or screens or diagrams to then use to communicate what are the insights and findings that you have. And then the other part of it is like, what are our recommendations? What is our so what? Where do we want to go further from here? What are we going to change based on our experience? Or what are some of the, what are we recommending that the business does to go forward? Or what are we recommending that we do as a design team? And then the final part of it is, what is the additional research? So I always love this section, because you come into the research with a certain amount of questions and things that you want to find out, and then you often leave with like 500 more questions. And so this part's really about that. What are some of the questions that have been raised from this that we're like, oh, actually, we need to do another round of research. And it also gets you in that position that we don't just do research and then it's like done forever. It's like, no, we need to like continuously do regular research to really understand our customers and to really understand the experiences that we're designing. And I also find it's really helpful, like say if a stakeholder comes up with a new question, like, oh, did we answer that? And if we didn't answer that in the session, then it's like, oh, well, we can put it in the additional research and we can answer that next time. So then they get used to that idea that, yeah, if we have questions that come out of it, we don't just make assumptions ourselves, like sometimes we might, but then we do have this option that we can run more research. And then the other part of it is that I find really helpful when playing back my research is to use real examples. And so this should be examples from the research that you've done. And so what I find is that by having real examples is that it really helps to bring your research to life, and it helps your stakeholders to really understand and connect with your research. And the other part of it is that you're not just presenting a report back to them, you're allowing them to slowly tell a story as to this is what the research means, and get them slowly bought into what does all of this mean by visualizing it or telling a story about like, this is what we found overall, rather than just throwing like a thesis at them. And so I find this is like a really nice way to get people really engaged with the research as well, and then constantly referring back to it. And so how I've done this before is when doing research into how people interact with their products. And so we're doing research into people's like primary bank accounts and their like secondary ones. And so what I got them to do was we had a blank piece of paper, and we got them to basically sketch up like, what is your financial world, and getting them to really mock up like, what are all the financial products that we have that they have, and how do they connect with each other? How do they use them? What are the past ones? When have they swapped from a different bank to a new one? What like investment platforms do they use? And get them to really mock that up so that we can start seeing how does that lay out? How are those interactions happening with their banks? And then the other part of that was, so we did all of this research with all of these different people. And then what we were able to do then was create a visualization like this, where we're grouping together all of the different products that they're using, and what are they using them for, and how do they relate to each other? How do they overlap? How do they send money in and out? And then the other part of it was as well as like, what companies are they with? Are they usually all the ones in this area? Are they usually with the same organization? Are they with different ones? And really starting to understand how people are interacting and using their money. And then the other part of this is that we had a few different overlays that went on top of this. And then as we went into the different sections, so each circle ended up being a section of the research pack that we were using. So we went into more information. We were overlaying on top of this, how the money went in, how the money went out of these different areas. And then also overlaying on top, like, what are those different needs or reasons why people are using these different products, and what need do they fill, and what are the jobs to be done for each of them? And so having like a really pared back version that we initially introduced for the research, and then adding and layering on top that information so that people are able to really start to build out and understand that picture, particularly if they weren't involved in the research as well. And so what I found from this one is that people kept going back to it and referring to it, and then understanding what decisions did we need to make. And we're able to really easily decide on what are the opportunities and what do we want to build from here going forward, because we're able to really see what that research meant for us as an organization. Well, and another one that I've done, so this is doing research into parental leave. So what we were doing was we wanted to understand the impact to people's retirement savings from going on parental leave, and like what are some of the things that we can help them do, and like in terms of like, say, the fees that they pay, what are some of the educational, like, well, really what is that opportunity that's out there for us to have a bit of an impact on. And so what we did was we got people to map out, each of them, a timeline that went into like, what are the key milestones, what are the challenges, key milestones like work, parenting, changes to their living situation, or like big purchases that they made. And then below that, at the bottom of the timeline, we were going like, what are the challenges that they have, or like, what are some of the worries that they have? Like, what do they wish that they knew at that point in time, now that we're reflecting back on it, because we were going from today and then looking back and then seeing like, what are those questions that they had, and what have they done differently? And so one of the stories that we heard was, which this one was a fun one, because what we heard was that they bought a sports car, and they were like super excited about it. They were like, this is fantastic. Like, we've financed a new sports car, we've got a loan for it, and it's like a 2-door like convertible. It's like, they were super excited about it. And then they found out a couple months later that they were actually expecting their first child, their daughter. And they were like, oh, this is super exciting, but also we can't fit the pram in the car, but we also can't fit the baby in the car, which is super necessary. And so then that was one of their regrets of like, should we have financed the car? Like, we shouldn't have bought this car. And like, they felt like they made like a big financial mistake, because they were like, oh, we have to sell it at a loss very soon after we bought it, and then we had to buy a new car. And that was one of their big like challenges or worries that they had, that they were like, oh, do we make that mistake to buying that car and then having to sell it? And so we were able to really start to see all of these differences in terms of like people's choices that they were making, and how it led up to when they had their families. And the other part of it was as well, so once we did that, we were able to then create a summary version of this timeline to go and play back to our team, to be like, this is what we've heard, these are some of the key milestones that people have, and the key questions that they're asking, so that we could really start to then go, based on that, what are the opportunities that we have to go forward as an organization to really help with this, and to make changes in terms of how people engage with their finances, and how they what are the like product offers that we could put into market to allow them to help them through these different moments in time where they feel like they're having a challenge. And by having this visualization of it, we're able to really get our stakeholders involved and engaged with it, and to help them to then make those decisions to go forward. And so just to recap, before your research, when you're planning it, you want to be clear on your research objectives. Give people that opportunity to be creative, and then also think ahead as to where you're going with your research. Then when you're running your research, you want to use a co-design approach. Take structured notes and then include a summary activity. And after each of your research sessions, what you want to do is a brain dump straight afterwards. Then you want to have a presentation template for the presentation that you give to decision makers. And as part of that presentation, you want to include real examples from your research so that people can really start to connect with it. So I just wanted to loop back around to my story that I was sharing. So you might be wondering whether I was fired from Woolworths, which is a very valid question. In those early days, I would have understood, and it would have made complete sense because there was bread flying, there was donuts flying. But throughout, over time, I actually learned the process, and I figured out how to manage the bread and the donuts at the same time. It became a carefully timed symphony. I knew to put the donut dough in the donut machine, then go back to the bread, then back to the donuts, just in time to take 6 perfectly shaped donuts, put them on a stick, roll them in cinnamon, and just the right amount to then slide into the box. I was the bakery boss. There was a lot less angry customers, and someone even smiled at me and asked how I was, proving that once you design and execute a great process, the product is better, and then your customers are happier. And so hoping that my research tips have helped in terms of being able to basically go through and come up with run your own research as well. What I might do is pass over to Charles and just see if there's any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Sarah. I was doing a little round of applause for an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Loved the donut story, loved the bread story, the bakery, amazing. You were the hero of it, truly. And we can start the last part here with questions from the audience. So we'll kind of kick it off. Any participants, feel free to raise your hand and unmute, or feel free to also put your questions in the chat. I'll kick us off with a question of my own for Sarah. In your experience, kind of just with the, user experience, research and all of that, this might not be super pertinent to the projects that are being worked on this weekend, but in terms of when you're working with someone above you that wants you to find a solution of some sort to a problem, how do you deal with it when that particular person might not find so much value in user research or doesn't know the value behind user research? Maybe not like a whole presentation like you just gave us, but how do you vocalize that, and how do you prove that like the research is worth doing?
Yeah, I always like to use examples of businesses that you can tell don't meet customer needs. Like Apple's always the one that everyone goes to because they're like, oh, like they understand their customers, they know how to create things. But then there's like often like say other organizations where it's like you can tell that they're not speaking to their customers, or they're building something that's like not product market fit. And so it's like that example of like talking about like, this is by understanding and talking to our customers, this is how we're able to then design something that they're looking for. And I often find that like the way that I do that is by understanding my stakeholders as well. Like what is that KPI, or what is that need that they're trying to meet? And then figuring out what is the way that I can help them meet that. And so like, say if what they're wanting to do is like increase revenue, and it's like, well, if we understand our customers, then we should be able to make more money, because you can't be a business that people want to give money to if you aren't valuable to them. And so understanding really where they're coming from, like what is that thing that they value as well, so that I can then position what I'm looking at, like the need to do research in the way that works for them. And I find that's a really great way to get buy-in as well. And the other part of it is like one of the points that I had is like that co-design process. And so bringing them in terms of like how we form and frame some of the business problems that we have, and making sure that they're, from a business perspective, that they're fully included in the process that we go through, particularly when it's like time to do any research as well. And so they've helped to frame the problems, and it's like, well, we have all of these problems, like customers aren't using our app, they're not doing this. Like, how do we think we could solve that? and getting them to also come along that process of going like, oh, well, if we research with customers, like we'd be able to like solve that question. Like, what are some of the assumptions that we're making? Like, how can we like go about doing that? And sometimes I find like doing a really quick research, like I've done it before where like we've done like literally like a week where we've on the Wednesday I've booked customers to come in and really showing that value quickly to answer some of the key questions that they have, instead of it being like, oh, let's do an extended research project. Like let's do a really fast turnaround time of some research, so I can show them the value as well of like by doing this. And if you give me more time and more resources, this is what we'd be able to do. But just with like a short like week or 2 week sprint, like this is the value that I'm able to give you as well.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful. I think for a lot of people that are going to be working with interdisciplinary teams, it's great to have.
Yeah, I heard a lot of questions like people saying, well, more about like, because I study a little bit of human resource before, and I heard like some people like in the company always complain about how human resource are trying to do research. They're like trying to promote something, but like people just like didn't see the value and think like it's really unnecessary. Oh, there's a question in the chat.
Yep, we have something from Hannah. Hannah says, I really love the idea of using real stories to inform product ideas. It definitely makes the pain points more real and relatable. However, how do you differentiate which data points / stories are one-off or very unique pain points versus something that is a necessary user need?
Yeah, and I think it's once you've gone through all of the research and then you're able to see like what are our insights, and once you've defined those insights, that's really when you're able to understand like which stories are the ones that like really highlight and bring to life the insights and what you found and what are the decisions, how does that relate to the decisions that you're trying to make. And so say that example that I had around the 3 circles where it was like we're researching into like what is people's financial world. The stories that I was telling about how the overlaps that happened from synthesizing all of the research and identifying like, okay, this is what the landscape looks like and how people are interacting with it. We're able to really, the stories that I was telling was about some of those key points in time around decisions we were trying to make and those stories that people had shared. And so those are the stories that I decide to highlight. Or even in that one around that retirement, like how people save for retirement during parental leave. That story that I shared with you was super related to one of the insights that we found out, which was around like people's, like one of the massive challenges was that people weren't planning as to when they were going to have children. And so that story was like one of those ones that we used to highlight because we found from like all of this research that there was a certain segment of people that were like, oh, we're making big choices, but we're not really sure, like, what do we want to do? What do we like, when do we want to have kids and stuff? And so that was like a really nice story for us to use to really connect the research and bring it to life. And so those are usually the ones that I pick where it's like, you can really start to, once you share it, the story, it's like, the insight really makes sense as to like why that's an insight. And so, yeah, I find that's like the easiest way to really understand which ones are key.
Super helpful. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was very insightful for the pain points and always doing something different. And Hannah says, makes a lot of sense. Thank you. We've also had another question that is especially for when you're looking at audiences to do research and those that aren't necessarily being paid. So you're talking to them when they're off the clock or just maybe they're students or other audiences and demographics like that. Is there, in your own experience, have you had to incentivize, so to speak, the research that you have to do and the questions that people have to answer? You mentioned a lot about kind of like making the activities more fun and getting people more involved. You had that talk about the people that were already kind of like stakeholders in the app, where you got a bunch of people to come because they were just excited to be those like big stakeholders in the formation of the app. So do you have any kind of thoughts on that, on incentivizing and going further?
Yeah, I feel like you should always like pay people for your time, for their time, like for the research. especially if you're taking like quite a lot amount of time for them as well to take part in it. But the thing is, like, yeah, sometimes like if you don't have the budget for the research as well, like the research that I was doing, the example, we actually, the advisors found so much value in the research. We weren't actually like paying incentives for that because it was a tool that they were going to be using day to day, and they were using currently in their financial advice practices. They saw so much value in it because of the way that we were including them in the process. We were using the co-design process with them, that they were like, we can see how much of an impact this will have and the value it will deliver, that they actually were happy to give us their time. And then we're able, like some of them, like they literally Friday afternoon, that's why we had entire financial advice practices turn up. They like gave their team the afternoon off to come speak to us for 2 hours because they saw that value. And so sometimes it is also to identify like what is the value exchange of this interaction, and particularly like if people are currently using the product that you're wanting to do research on, identifying like what is something that is valuable for them, and sometimes it might be like being able to be heard, engaging, seeing the outcome of like their ideas, but often like I find the easiest way is to pay people. But the other times is, yeah, if you don't have the money for it, is to make it so that it's not like, it might be a short session where it's like, oh, it's just 10 minutes. What is, if we're able to like make it work for them, like we come to them and make it as easy as possible for those people. And like maybe it's a Zoom session for 10 minutes. And what we do is we give them like something else in exchange for their time. Like we send them like something in the mail or something like that. And what is something that works for them so that we're not making them go out of their way to give us value. And I always find it's like, make it so that it works for them. And that's the same with like the tools that I use, is like, if it's easier for them to talk to me on the phone, we'll talk on the phone. I don't want them to have to get their laptop out to come chat to me. Like, how do I make it super easy for them so that they can interact with me and we can both like feel like it's been a valuable interaction.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I think that's really helpful for people that are either looking at this weekend's user research, or for anyone that's looking to go into their own personal projects and future, especially as students, and they might not be backed by a whole big organization. You get it. You've been there. So thank you. Really, that was very helpful and so much insight. And I think for a lot of students, I'll point out that it might be worth thinking about that students in this designathon already, we've seen so many people reaching out to the rest of the participants here for they're doing research. So we keep seeing people messaging saying, I've got a Google form, everyone come fill it out for doing research on how much do you travel, for instance, or what do you find useful in this case, in this scenario, et cetera, and lots of demographic information as well. So we've already had a ton of students that are interested in doing user research and having that be valuable as part of their process.
Yeah, and especially making it like super easy for people to do. Like if you don't have the money to do it, like if you make it super easy for them, like, oh, we just have like 5 questions. Here's something that's going to take like 5 minutes of your time, like making it super easy for them, and like making sure that they can easily engage with you is like the best. Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people feel the exact same way. Anyone that's done a survey before, even for classes or anything like that, totally agree that it's become embedded into us. For short and sweet, that gets it done. So thank you for your insight. I want to thank you again, Sarah. If there's no other questions in the chat while I'm talking, anyone else, feel free to throw your questions in the chat, but I'll point out that Sarah is coming to us zooming all the way from Australia. It's very early. Well, early for me, sort of early for Sarah. So thank you so much, Sarah, for zooming in and waking up and being here with us. We really appreciate your time and your experience and your expertise to come be with us here today. Thank you for being part of Catalyst 2023, and thank you for the amazing slide deck.
Thank you so much for having me. But yeah, if there is any extra questions, feel free to reach out. It's morning here, so I'm not going to sleep anytime soon.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And thank you everyone for coming and joining. And this was our last workshop of the day. So it was a great way to round it off before the final stretch of the Designathon. So thank you again, Sarah, for being here.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. Feel free to reach out to Sarah. We'll end the recording here, but this will be available later.